Good evening and welcome back to another episode of Please Call Me Crazy, brought to you by Free People Radio and now powered by our first sponsor, TireGet.com. That's TireGet.com. You all have to buy tires from somebody, whether it's today or in the future. Help the movement, support the movement. We believe in the freedom of movement, and that's exactly what the establishment wants to take from you now. I am your host, Royce White, and I am here in the belly of the beast, Minneapolis, Minnesota, for episode number 43 of Please Call Me Crazy. If you didn't get a chance on Friday and Thursday, we had another great conversation with Tim Gordon and Seafood Greg Nelson. If you didn't get a chance, you should go listen to last Friday's episode with Greg Nelson, who is my MMA coach and also a world-renowned mixed martial artist and mixed martial arts instructor, as well as self-defense in a variety of disciplines, not beholden to Muay Thai, Jiu-Jitsu, wrestling, uh, a bunch of them. He's just one of the most well-rounded mixed martial arts instructors and coaches and trainers in the entire world. Part of it, head coach at the academy here in Minnesota. There's a number of academies around the city, but the flagship academy is there in Brooklyn Center, where I train, and I've been training there for about 3 years now, looking to get back into the octagon. My last fight was last December, not this past December, but the December before. And then the campaign happened, so I was flush with a bunch of stuff there. And then we had to spend a lot of time getting this podcast studio up and rolling. Now that this is kind of moving in the right direction and we've got our arms around that, I'm looking to get back into the octagon and finish out the rest of my athletic career there in the octagon as long as the Lord will permit me good health and youth athletically. Big three's coming up about 8 weeks out from that, 6 weeks out maybe. June 25th is the first weekend. It's going to be action packed this year. We're back on the road. The last 2 years in the big three, in 2020, we were very confined to Las Vegas due to COVID and unpredictable policy changes state by state in terms of live events. And then last season, and then we had one season where Big Three was just completely canceled because of COVID's policy, because of the COVID policy. And then last year when we returned, we were confined to Dallas because Texas still don't know. I mean, people still don't know. We were still having some COVID spikes and things like that. Last year during the year when the venues were scheduled, coming kind of into 2022 summer. So we spent a lot of time in Dallas. This year, we're going back on the road. Every weekend's a different city, starting in Chicago, June 25th, and Dallas the second week. And I forget where from there, but it's going to be a different city each weekend. And that should be a lot of fun. I know the big three fan base out there has been waiting for the big three to go back on the road and go city by city. I think it's the best format for the energy of the games and the momentum of the brand. And the big three, look, the big three is the reason why I keep mentioning the big three and the reason why I participate in the big three. Number one, I was blackballed from the NBA. That's a fact. I watch the NBA playoffs now, and I watch because I have friends and people that I came up through the circuit with in high school, but came through the college scene with, came into the NBA with, and in my draft class, and people I have relationships with. So I stay tuned in because I'm a real student of the game, and I love the game of basketball. I'm coaching my young son's team now, and I spend a lot of time working with my alma mater high school team and some of the young guys there, and my younger brother and sister who are both college age. So anybody I can get my hands on basketball wise, I love the game. I love to teach the game. I love to coach the game and train people in the game. And I spent a lifetime doing it, so it's second nature. And it really is a beautiful game. And the reason why I always make sure to mention the big three is I want you guys all to go support the big three this year. And I know I come on here and talk about sports being a jerk off, and I think the corporatizing of sports has made it a jerk off. I think the politicizing and then bait and switch politicizing of sports has made it a jerk off. I'm not saying that we should do away with sports. I'm not saying there's no room for sports. I'm saying, and what I've often been saying is that the way sports is used is to distract us from bigger issues regarding our citizenship and our own self governance. And I think Ice Cube is somebody who is trying to um, use his love for the game, his entrepreneur, his entrepreneurial ambition, creativity, his reputation, and all of the things he's learned in the entertainment business to promote a league that is really Americana. And yes, it's black owned, and there's something to be said for that. And I always like giving black people ownership of things. When you give black people ownership of things, when you give any person an ownership of a thing, it endears them to the land upon which that thing is owned. And that would circle us back to the reparations conversation. I'm not going to go into it now, but over time, I'm going to continue to try and lay out how a path forward for this country includes a great number of controversial issues that we just lack leadership on. But anyway, I digress. The reason why I want you to go support the Big Three is because it's an American owned business by a man who has been, right at the forefront of controversy when it comes to how we look at American politics. And he's been honorable and courageous enough to let me speak my mind about a bunch of issues that would have had me blackballed from the NBA had I already not been blackballed from the NBA when I started in the Big Three, right? I mean, I understand when my first season in the Big Three was 2019. It's about 3 years ago, 4 years ago, the summer 2019. And by 2019, I was what? I was 20, 28 years old at the time, 27 going on 28. I had already been blackballed from the NBA by the time I joined the Big Three. Okay. The things that have happened since and the stances people have had to take since, I would have been blackballed 3 times over. I mean, and that's dark. That's dark for me to even think about. And it's a dark prospect for my younger brother who would obviously love to be able to play in the high at the highest level, or my up and coming son who may still have to face the consequence or penalty of being blackballed. A lot of these former NBA players who had trouble during their time in the league, and then they have a son. What they do at some point is they go bow before the throne. They kiss the ring. Usually, it was the ring of David Stern, and then all is forgiven. They become a mouthpiece for whatever sycophantic, perennial white guilt sort of motif that the NBA higher ups play on the players, and they do play it on the players, and they play it often. Don't get caught with a DUI. Don't get caught on drunk. Don't get caught, having an issue with the drug, with the substance abuse problem, like my boy OJ Mayo or my boy Tyreek Evans, who I came up through the circuit with. Don't run into any problems like that, right? You run into problems like that, you got to come before and kiss the ring, and you got to grovel. And it's like, you made some huge mistake that nobody else does. And we as fans look at it the same way. Like, our athletes should be up and above the normal problems of everyday people. And it's unrealistic. It shows an unrealistic reflection of how we see ourselves. Now, when athletes are at their height, at the pinnacle, when they do have their life in order, when they do have their spiritual house in order, as well as their physical ability, their health, and their overall person, I think you have a perfect recipe for great world leaders. Um, they understand self-sacrifice. They understand hard work. They understand determination. They understand being meticulous and paying attention to detail. They understand giving up the self for the greater collective. They understand, these are things that are ingrained in athletes, which is why I love coaching the young guys. I'm in practice the other day, and you got your young guys in the sixth grade who still sometimes have the instinct to dribble with their head down. And I just stop practice and go, listen, all your problems are in front of you. There's nothing down there. There's nothing down there. There's nothing back there. Everything behind you, you have to feel. Everything that's important is in front of you, right? And sports has a way of just giving us those type of life lessons, and sports help shape me. So I say that again. Follow the Big Three this summer. It's a great league. It's fun. It's entertaining. The half court pace is much different. It's a much different game, but that adds a sort of variety to it. And again, it's summer basketball, right? When the NBA is over, and don't get me wrong, the NBA from a game standpoint, I mean, some of the savants, okay, not just the players, the coaches, the trainers, everything that's going into building up the game to where it is today is magnificent. If you watched the Phoenix and Denver game last night, you got to see some of the most elite some of the most elite evolution of basketball to date. And you could throw anybody in there. I don't care who you throw in there. When you talk about the evolution of the game from an offensive standpoint, individually from an offensive standpoint, and as a team, you got to see some of the most elite evolution of the game of basketball last night between Denver, the Denver Nuggets, and the Phoenix Suns. And from a variety of bodies, from a variety of players who come from a variety of places. I mean, it's the convergence of the best of multiculturalism. And I'm not a huge proponent of multiculturalism because it's been hijacked and used and weaponized against us. But basketball and sports is actually one of the places where multiculturalism shows us this unique evolution that comes from hard work and commitment and determination and really creativity. I mean, Devin Booker. Some of you won't even know who this is. You're like, Royce, you're talking basketball. I don't follow. Devin Booker is a genius of human movement, an absolute genius of human movement, an absolute spatial genius. Kevin Durant, an absolute genius of movement, as well as being incredibly gifted physically. Jokic, absolute genius of basketball, right? He's not a genius of movement. Well, in a sense, he is too. But it's just more of his awareness, his intuitiveness of the game. I mean, they start really young there in Serbia, and he's been playing at a high level since a young age, and that's partly how he's been able to refine those skills to that level. But the level of touch for a 300-pound 7-footer, and I mean, it's absolutely amazing to watch. It's amazing to watch. Jamal Murray, genius of movement, spatial genius. And the performances they put on last night were great, but at some point this NBA season will come to an end. And if you so desire to watch basketball past and beyond the NBA season, tune in for 10 weeks for the Big Three. Okay. Other than that, we will be getting the band.video mirror channel updated over the next week or so. Our good boy brother Tanner is gonna be aiding and assisting with that. As well as our BitChute. We'll be backing everything up on BitChute, getting caught up with that. And we're going to get our Odyssey channel built and backed up, as well as I promised, the Patreon channel, the Patreon platform is going to come, and it's going to be a variety of ways that you can contribute. I know a lot of people give us feedback. How can we contribute? How can we help? Your voice is needed. We want to be able to help. We want you to be able to stay on air and all of those things. Look, we're fine right now. I'm not saying we won't take your help, but we're in this for the long haul. This is a fight. I'm committed. This part isn't going anywhere. With that being said, everything possible could help. Had I been fortunate enough or unfortunate enough to slave away in the NBA under the gag of censorship and make $100 million or $200 million or $600 million, maybe $1 billion, who knows? If I would have put a fucking dress on and dressed like a woman in some State Farm insurance ad or campaign, Lord knows they would have gave me investment access and maybe $1 billion. Because what's better than a fair-skinned, mixed-raced, green-eyed, articulate, and eloquent masculine man that we can emasculate in front of the public? We'll pay $1 billion fucking dollars for that a million times over. And we got the money because we printed. That's what we're going to get into today. But I didn't do that. So I wasn't fortunate like that when it comes to financial resources. But God's provided a way, because here I am in front of you. And in that same vein, it seems now, like at 32 years old, it seems like a blessing that I didn't go through it that way. Right. You can't go in my past or in my track record and see that I had any time where I compromised the morals or the ethics. Never. Never. There was never a time. My entry at 21, you can go read me talking in Sports Illustrated about crony capitalism. You can go read me talk about corporatocracy. You can go read me talk about the pitfalls of a money-first radical materialist society at 21 years old. When I came into the NBA, that's how I was talking. And they want everybody out there to believe that I'm not playing because I was afraid to fly. And that's why if you look my name up on Google, the first mainstream media propaganda that comes to the surface is Royce White was afraid to fly. That's what derailed his career. Those are the authoritative sources that inform the Wikipedia page, which now sits at the top of the Google algorithm, which so many people trust. They don't double check. They don't triple check. And sometimes you can't double or triple check because the subject who's being spoken about is no longer alive or had no recorded material for you to reference, right? If you ask me a question about George Bush, and I go look up his Wikipedia, I can reference that against him speaking himself. There are some people in history or some time periods in history or some events in history where there is no record, where there is no recorded history. Now, you ask me a question about Donald Trump. Fortunately, I can go to Wikipedia and I can reference that against an hour-long speech that I could find, right? And so, but most people don't do that. And it's not by accident that certain individuals like myself have been shadow banned, censored, have been a target of the establishment to go out of their way and paint an obscure picture of who we actually are, what our story really was. And that's intended for you. It's not aimed at me. I love when Donald Trump said, "Oh, it's not me they want, it's you." It's you they're after. I'm just in the way. I would express a similar sentiment with regards to myself. Um, but again, I was already blackballed when I first came into the big three, and had we COVID, that was one issue. China, that was another huge issue. The Federal Reserve, that's a major issue. Jeffrey Epstein, Edward Snowden, Julian Assange, the FBI, the security state, the war in Iraq, war in Afghanistan, any number of things. All of these things are no-fly zones for your average athlete. And that's why your average athlete don't understand this. And start the clock for us, Tanner. How long we been rolling so far? I just want to have a time check. 18 minutes. Okay, we have 15 minutes. I know you guys sometimes the intros get a little long, but I got to set the stage here. Understand why most of your athletes tend to ruminate around wokeism. Okay, it's not by choice. It's not by happenstance. It's not a coincidence. It's by design. The corporate media runs the entertainment business. They run the sports business. And at some point, in the interest of the integrity of sports overall, writ large, it would be wise for us to put certain guardrails around our sports institutions and the influence from corporate media. But the reason why your athletes tend to ruminate around the wokeism is because they know those are the topics that have been forwarded by the liberal establishment that they can speak about with some safety, with some level of safety, right? So everybody goes, well, why does LeBron only talk about BLM? Well, because he knows it's safe to talk about BLM. Okay, most other athletes as well. Your few outliers who want to venture off the beaten path and speak about some things that are really controversial, they get slapped on. They get dinged over the head right away. You see it, whether it's the guy from the NH and it not beholden to black or white. Although the professional sports landscape is really dominated commercially by black athletes, so there's a certain twist to the narrative that always leans one way because of that fact. But whether it's your Kyrie Irvings or whether it's the white hockey player there, that spoke out about the LGBTQ pride stuff in the NHL, doesn't matter. Not beholden to race. The people who really speak out, they get dinged over the head, and it reverberates throughout the entire athlete community, right down to the grassroots level, to set a precedent that going forward, without even being told what's a little too controversial for you to speak on. And it's a sickness that pervades the entire society because if your sports are front and center if your sports are the biggest dreams young men have, if the vanity and pride and ego and idolatry of sports is front and center for a society and a group of young men, then they all know structurally, they all know systematically, they're all conditioned to talk about things that are safe. These are the real mechanisms, and that's what we're going to get into today. The topic for today is the art of crisis. The art of crisis. Do we really have a crisis right now? I'm gonna go way above my pay grade now, right? I'm gonna go way outside of my place as an athlete, right? When I was in the NBA and I was fighting against the archaic and then later would realize the intentional, manipulative attitude towards the human psychology, which was really the predicate for Silicon Valley to use professional sports as one of the main drivers of the casino theory, the casino game theory of social media and dopamine and brainwashing, all a part of control, all a huge part of control. But when I was fighting against that, they want you to think that I was fighting for the odds. I got to go on. I'm going to end up going off today. I can feel it. They want you to believe that Royce White was fighting so players with anxiety can get special treatment, that players with anxiety can get access to psychiatrists. No, wrong. That's a lie. Royce White, me, I'm Royce, not the AI, some AI. This isn't an AI trick, okay? This is not an AI trick that needs to be said nowadays, and we're going to talk about that today too, okay? We're going to cover the whole gamut today because it's all connected, but that's not what I was fighting for. I could tell that the narrative and the reality there was a schism, that the narrative and the reality weren't coherent. I could see it. I could feel it. I could intuit it from the way that people were talking, even upon my arrival, 1 month into the draft process. Okay, this is way before the draft even happens. Just in the traveling around to the different pre-draft workouts, I could hear the rhetoric. And most players, having spent a lifetime getting to this point and right on the precipice of reaching out and touching that dream, most people put their head down and they march forward and they cancel out all the noise. Well, I happen to be good enough to listen to the noise and still perform. Okay, I was unique in that way. I was fortunate in that way, and I was listening. And not only was I listening, I was listening intently. And in there, I could hear the real diagnosis of professional sports as a microcosm of society writ large. Corporatocracy. What you can and can't say, what you're expected to do and not do, how you're expected to live and not live. And I had a problem upon arrival. And when I fought, the culmination of it was, oh, wow, you guys have no mental. You mean to tell me the same NBA that has every little detail ironed out in the collective bargaining agreement down to the color of the socks that you must wear? That NBA missed one of the most important areas of comprehensive health. No mental health policy at all. There's not even a mention of mental health in the entire collective bargaining agreement. And we're not talking about a collective bargaining agreement that was ancient, a collective bargaining agreement that was a dinosaur or a relic or just a document that's been living on for 40 years. We're talking about a collective bargaining agreement that's refurbished and re-agreed upon every 4 years. Negotiations start for the new collective bargaining agreement 2 years in advance of its ending or its close. And they just miss mental health and the overall health policy and the overall health health portion of the collective bargaining agreement. Mental health just kind of floated under the radar. No. No, the NBA is a sine qua non of corporatocracy. They are the watering hole for a global corporate community, and the entire global corporate community knew in 2013 and well before that social media, that digital media, that social media and digital media and the internet of things. The fourth industrial revolution was on the horizon. You just don't know. When you go to get your fucking beer and popcorn from the concession stands, you don't realize the plans they have for you. You don't realize the agenda that's being executed. You don't realize how the global affects the local, how your sports are your politics and your politics are your sports, and the politics are never off. That's why the sports are never off. You don't realize they do, but I heard them. I heard them and I was paying attention, and I had enough balls to ask the question. Really? Here's the charter on our social responsibility. And here's our social responsibility charter. It says right here, morals and ethics and values. What does that really mean? What does it really mean? The art of crisis. Let's get down to it. Are we even in a crisis? Are we even in a crisis? I'm going to shoot way over your head today. I hope you can follow along. And again, if you're new with us, this is the show where we go deep. We ask the questions that make people accuse us of being crazy, just for even asking. Not giving a definitive answer. What are the questions, right? I have this media company, The Last Renaissance. You can go visit it, thelastrenaissance.com, and that's going to be another place where we start to build up the content, another type of content, more docuseries type of content. You can find some I Flew Here stuff there where I kind of trailer and create little highlight videos and little docuseries of my time in the Big Three. But the slogan for The Last Renaissance as a media company is, what are the questions? Everybody wants answers. Everybody wants the answers. Everybody wants solutions. But what are the questions? We have to ask the right questions first. And the question now is, what do we do? Right? I hear that question. We know the problem, Royce. We know what's going on. We see the contradiction, but what do we do? Well, the first thing we have to do is get our mind in order. We have to get our mind oriented around the problem properly. That's no easy feat. Sounds easier than it is, right? Easier said than done. But we have to do it. And there are layers upon layers upon layers upon layers upon layers upon layers of propaganda, upon layers of blacked out operations, upon layers of lies, upon layers of crony capitalism and corporate connections, upon layers of hidden corporate agendas, upon layers of international banking cartel agendas, upon layers of lies from the war and military industrial complex. Where do we begin? Well, let's go down to the root. Crisis. And you'll be familiar with the term, never let a good crisis go to waste. Well, there's the crisis of our time, and then there's the crisis of any time, and then there's the crisis of the human condition. And if you extrapolate out, you can use crisis now, but also historically and into the future to properly gauge and predict human behavior. Another byproduct of the psychological warfare and the psychological study and warfare that's been waged against us by our elites. This is where science has become the heresy against God, right? No. It's not up to God. It's not destiny. It's not fate. It's not about choices. It's not about God's plan. No, we can intervene. We can play God, and we can play God through all of these scientific sort of endeavors. Scientific discoveries. One of them being dopamine, serotonin, understanding how the human brain works, understanding how the human brain responds to certain stimuli, frequencies. The list goes on and on and on. Story arcs, narratives, right? Understanding how the human mind and the human emotion responds to certain phenomena. Crisis. How does the human mind respond to crisis? Well, the human mind usually responds to crisis as we would expect they want crisis to end. They want things to be normal. They want things to be less chaotic. They want things to be stable. They want things to be secure. They want the essentials to be plentiful. And I talked last week about the uniparty, and I want you to understand when I asked the question, are we in a crisis? Yes and no. Yes and no. No, we're not in the crisis that they say we're in. Do we have an economic crisis? No. No, we don't have an economic crisis. That's not a reality. We have the only crisis we really have. The only crisis we really have is a crisis of leadership. We have a crisis of leadership that is a byproduct of a crisis of faith. A crisis of faith from our leaders and a crisis of faith from the widespread, from the wide body populace. We have a crisis of faith and a crisis of leadership, but we're being told we have an economic crisis. And no better example than the debt ceiling that now becomes the controversial policy. And I am what you would call a debt hawk, right? I am what many mainstream media, industrial complex, uniparty status quo purveying shills would say, would call a debt hawk. What I talk about is debt hawkery, right? $32 trillion in national debt. Oh, that's debt hawkery. Why are you talking about the debt? Why are you saying don't raise the debt ceiling? Oh, if the government's going to run out of money, people are going to lose their housing. People are going to lose their jobs. People are going to lose their welfare checks. People are going to lose. Right? People are always going to lose when the government can't keep spending money on stealing money from you, and that's the scam, right? So I'm what you call it. I'm what they would call a debt hawk, and I guess I am, because like I said on Jason Whitlock last week, when I ride down West 7th Street in downtown St. Paul, the capital here in Minnesota, and the potholes are so big on the beautiful river road, right? The beautiful river road that runs along the Mississippi here in town. The potholes are so big that it's damaging the axles of the cars. Okay. I'm talking 3-foot deep potholes. When the potholes are so big and the debt is $32 trillion, I start to ask questions. I mean, my math mind just starts to go, holy shit. How much does it cost to fix these roads? How much? And so let me, again, crisis, right? They want you to feel that crisis. This is what I'm trying to convey to you today, and I'm going to continue to beat this horse until you understand how to view these things. It's not that they can't fix the fucking potholes. It's they let the potholes be that way in the first place, so you feel the sense of crisis to justify and validate their oversight of the money and the budget, where they can steal as much as they want as long as they plug the potholes before you say enough is a fucking enough. And the problem with it is basketball and sports become the never-ending 365 days, 24/7 marathon spectacle where that keeps you from ever getting to the point where you say enough is enough. So they got a great racket running. They create the crisis. They're great at creating crisis. Oh, crisis is easy. The crisis business is easy. They create a crisis. Now everybody feels the urgency to solve that crisis, right? And you look to give your freedom, your authority, your self-governance over to our elite ruling political class to solve the crisis by voting for a fuck stick like Mitch McConnell in Kentucky. You people in Kentucky, I don't know why the fuck you're voting for Mitch McConnell. I just let him. I don't know why you're voting for. I don't know why nobody runs against Mitchell McConnell. I don't know why they vote for Mitchell McConnell. It's like voting Democrat. You might as well vote for a fucking Democrat. That's the reality. You don't want to admit it, but that's the reality. You might as well vote for a Democrat. And I don't want to hear all the House and the Senate and the Senate majority and the Senate minority and yeah. Rhino. And we're going to talk more about the uniparty in a moment. But they create the crisis. You all want this political solution, and then they now have the circumstance to justify and validate stealing your fucking money, hand over fist, and providing that solution when and before you say it's enough. But they can drag their feet because you're so distracted with being a fucking jerk off. A lot of people, they don't like the language. Oh, your language, your foul mouth. You 401k boomers and you 501c3 Christians are killing the country because you're more worried about your 401k. You're more worried about trying to uphold some thin veil of civility and posh academic politeness for whoever the fuck you're doing it for. I don't know. God knows your heart. You think you cussing is going to escape the wickedness of you preserving the status quo of corruption? Writ large, and you'll say you won't, but I mean, come on. It's we the people. The Constitution is brilliant. If we just said no, the whole thing would be over, but we kind of like it. I digress. I'll get back to what I was saying. Crisis, crisis, crisis. They're good at creating crisis. Are we really in an economic crisis? What is the economy based on? The economy is based on resources, employer base, worker base, people that are able-bodied and willing to work, and the amount of energy necessary to accomplish the output of the populace's needs. We're not in an economic crisis. The crisis we're in is a crisis of awareness, a crisis of understanding, a crisis of political aptitude, a crisis of understanding governance and self-governance. We're not in a crisis. The crisis is we've allowed them to tell us we're in a crisis to justify why they should stay in charge. Because they're the only ones who can solve the crisis. We're not in a crisis. The whole financial crisis is a Ponzi scheme. And I'm going to say some very controversial shit today, okay? One of which is, what do we even mean when we say communism? See, the conservative movement, we love to talk about communism. Oh, we're anti-communist, right? No, we're not. No, we're not. Oh, America, we're anti-communist, yeah, in the Constitution. And the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, not in the Republican Party. The Republican Party isn't anti-communist. Give me a break, guys. Give me a break. We got to start to draw the lines and separate from these people. Your RNC fucksticks, they want to tell you the narrative. The only way we'll win is if we stop all the infighting. Don't fight. Don't fight. Come together. Which really means they want to make the Donald Trump supporters and the America First contingency surrender to the corrupt status quo in the interest of the end result of the elections. That's what they mean when they say don't fight. They're not saying don't fight, and we're going to concede that America First needs to be the policy, and you can tell that because the back side of what they say is we need to get away from all these cultural wedge issues like abortion or gun rights or the debt ceiling. Or let's get away from those issues. Let's become Democrat light, and maybe more Democrats will vote Republican than Democrat. I mean, we'll out Democrat the Democrats, right? It's fucking lunacy at its highest order. I don't know how people would say it, much less all of you believe it. But that's what the RNC is pushing. Let's not fight. Let's not fight so we can come together and win. Let's come together and win under the right auspices. And one of the first conversations we need to have is communism, because communism has become a buzzword of today's political discourse. And the great trick is to juxtapose our America First movement and the desire to see a more genuine Americana nation in foreign policy and domestic governance, to juxtapose us to China, who's outright communist, and say, oh, well, we're not the Chinese, or we're not red Soviet Russia, or we're not any of these other places who were explicitly communist. No, we're secretly communist. The Federal Reserve System that was put into place in 1913 was a bait and switch way to implement communism into a free market enterprise society. And that's what's happened. And you say, well, what do you mean by that? Well, in short, and first off, you had the communism, right? You'll love how this, as the great Steve Bannon would say, there are no conspiracies, but there are no coincidences. And I think this might just be the sine qua non of a statement like that, in affirming what he's saying. This might be the sine qua non. You get the Federal Reserve, and then you get the personal income tax 5 years later, right? 2 to 3 years later. So you get a way to control money, siphon money, pirate money from the American people. And then shortly thereafter, now you have this huge personal income tax that was never constitutionally, that was never a part of any, it's breaking the law. The personal income tax is breaking the law. It's not constitutional. And I bring this up because, people seem to have this huge gaping hole in their understanding of the world and American politics on what they're willing to pay for and what they're not willing to pay for. And they go, I won't pay for this, I won't pay for that. One of them was reparations. You'll see in the comments often, I'm not paying reparations. You are paying into a communist system. The Federal Reserve is a communist system. The taxation that happens through our corrupt political DC elites and the Federal Reserve is communism. You're already paying for the roads, and then you got to pay for, you should look at the budget. If you look at the budget, you'll see right away that it's communism. And what's even more scary is it's communism for the ultimate expression of a death cult. Ooh, us conservatives got to get right about this right here, right now. We got to get right about this right now at the outset. Before the movement goes any further, before we dive any deeper, let's get under the right auspices. Because if we're going to stop fighting, I'm fine with that. Let's rally. But let's rally under the truth. Because if you rally under lies, it's a house of cards, right? Federal government is a communist effort towards a death cult. Because what we really pay for are the two industrial complexes, medical and military. Those are the two biggest pieces of the budget, the military and medicine and Social Security. And then, if you go look at the fine details of the budget, you'll find that there's $100 billion goes to foreign affairs, which is the State Department, right? The CIA. So the CIA gets their $100 billion, and then you have international projects and funds. It's all a big scam. It's all the government already doing what the communists do. And then you look at the overall GDP of the federal government, and you start to realize that we have slowly and surely, through the grandiosity and overreach and expansion of federal government, become a communist nation. We're already a communist nation. And everybody wonders why we opt for China. Of course we opt for China. We're China light. We're China in disguise. That's why the partnership works so well. It works so well for them. And it works so well for our elites. It doesn't work well for you at all. It's shit for you. You get COVID and you get fentanyl, and then eventually you're going to get a fucking gulag number and a jumpsuit, and you'll be marched off to some re-education camp if you're a Christian, or 501c3 Christian. You think that you're worried about profanity, but I would like to be a fly on the wall when you get marched into a concentration camp and they hit you with the kettle rod. Then we'll see how much fucking civility you have then. Then we'll see how beholden you are to the doctrines of the Bible and Christ then, right? When they take your wife and kids from you, when they take your wife and kids and they take them to a separate part of the education camp, re-education camps, and you don't see them for 3 years, then we'll see how soft you are when it comes to profanity or the expressions of one's language to properly convey the urgency of the time, right? But those of you who are scared to cuss now will be scared to cuss then. And when the revolt breaks out inside the re-education camp, you won't go unless you know you have a winning position. You'll be on your knees at the glory hole, and then they'll have a Xi Jinping dildo hanging up in the wall of the re-education camp for you Americans here in this country. They'll have a Xi Jinping glory hole with a fake Xi Jinping cock hanging out of the wall, and you'll be on your knees sucking it. You don't like that? Okay. Well, stop sucking it now. You're doing it now. You're on your knees now. You don't realize it, but you're on your knees already. You at home. This ain't the podcast where I come and I tell you all the things you like to hear about why the Democrats are so bad. Or whoever's so bad. I don't give a fuck. Pick one. Doesn't matter. Yeah, we could talk about that all day long. When we talk about what we're going to do, what's the plan starts with us. Any reasonable plan starts with me, right? Any reasonable plan starts with me. But before I can even start to take action, before I go to take a shot, I always talk to my young players about shooting. And I say, you shoot a low percentage because your shot preparation isn't there. You don't prepare to shoot the ball. You're not prepared. When you get the ball, you're startled by it, and then you think in an urgency, oh, I should shoot it. And you shoot it bad because the later you're prepared to do what you need to do, the harder it is to do it with any consistency, right? You build consistency through preparation. We're not prepared. We're not prepared philosophically. We're not prepared mentally. We're not prepared strategically. We're not prepared in our thoughts to take any action. We're not prepared to sustain a protest at the Federal Reserve. We're not prepared because we're not organized. We lack organization. And the first place where we're disorganized is in our thoughts and in our worldview. This is the layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of misinformation and disinformation and propaganda and black ops and psychological and psyops and psychological warfare. This is what we have to unwire. This is why people like Steve Bannon and Alex Jones and what they've done and what they continue to do is priceless. Don't sit at home, jerk off, and go, oh, where's the action? Where's the action? First, we got to rewire your brain. You want some quick answer. You want some quick solution. But it was your father and your father's father and your father's father's father who laid the predicate and the groundwork for what we face now. This shit ain't going to happen quick. And the only way it happens quick is through a radical transformation of the human mind and human spirit and human will that you usually only see through miracles, divine intervention, metaphysical intervention, faith, God, right? So I would pray. I would start by praying just to backstop and keep open the potential, not to preclude any miracles. Keep open the potential that God will reach his hand in and change the human spirit and will in one fell swoop. But other than that, you have to start to prepare. You have to start to prepare your mind. And how do we prepare our mind with what we see today? Understand that we're already a communist nation. Despite all of the free market enterprise and free trade and capitalism. Capitalism is undermined when you have a Federal Reserve that's corrupt and a taxation that's punitive, that's impugned upon you. You're already living in communism. 50% of your money is going to the roads that they don't even fix. It's going to the CIA. It's going to the Defense Department. It's going to the, and look, I'm not, I'm as much of a China hawk as anybody. We're going to have to fight a war against China at some point, maybe sooner than later. Men should be slow to war and quicker to solutions, quicker to peace, always. But you have to believe that God and Satan, when the line is drawn that clear in the sand, that two sides will come to blows. And there's one side of the line that's for God. And then this middle area says they're for God, but really they're just putting on the front. And then there's this other side that's completely anti-God. So we're down 2/3 of vote already. This is already a communist nation. okay? The question is, what can we do now? Nationalize the most important things. Nationalize the most important institutions. Now people will go, oh, you're a fucking Nazi. That's what the Nazis did. Well, yeah, that is what the Nazis did. Along with a number of other horrific and terrible things. But, if I play in a basketball game and I shoot 65% from the field, I go 8 of 12 from the three, I go 8 of 10 from the free throw line, but I have 4 turnovers. And one of those turnovers is at the most critical point in the game, the last possession when it's tied 0-0. I mean, when it's tied 100-100. I think 0-0 because as a coach, if you go into a timeout and it's 100-100, you go to the players and you say, look, it's 0-0. It's this possession right here. But it's tied 100-100. I turn the ball over. They run down, get a layup, and win. That's a catastrophic mistake that you can judge against the rest of the game that I played. But you can't discredit the other good things that I did in the game. You can't say that those things didn't happen or that they weren't good. You just have to summarize and saying, hey, that was a great game, but you really blew the entire thing when you turned the ball over at the most critical moment, right? You could say the same thing for the Nazis, right? And the reason why they turned the ball over at the most critical moment is because their ambition and will wasn't guided by faith. They didn't have faith at their center. They had Darwinism at their center. They had science at their center. They had ingenuity at their center. So they were already off the path. They were destined to fumble the ball at the most critical moment. And the most critical moment was like, who are we going to throw the blame on? Well, let's just blame the Jews. Blame the Jews? No, it's not the Jews. It's not the Jews. It's not the Christians. It's not the Muslims. It's some of them too, some of the time, maybe even a lot of the time. But really, it's you. It's you at home. You're the reason why, because you want to opt into a system that draws upon the convenience of security and materialism instead of the courage and faith that it takes to walk by faith and not by sight. That's the crisis of the human condition. That's the root crisis that they continue to draw upon to take your freedoms and rights. Whether it's fascists or communists or liberals, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. They're drawn upon the same crisis of the human condition. You want security. You want material wealth. And the materialism came later. Really, it's about security. I mean, the fundamental desire is security. And we can provide security for people. We've become very good at it, Everybody talks about how crazy the world is getting. It's nowhere near as dangerous and barbaric as it was in any other earlier iteration of civilization. So intellectually, we become good at what we did very well was we intellectualized and scholasticized. I don't even know if that's the word. We over academized. I'm just making up words, but we've made our society very academic, right? And that provided people with a lot of security. That conditioned people to be more civil. And there's great value in that. But it's the one turnover at the most critical point in the game that's going to decide the game, right? And we're at that most critical point now. We've been at that most critical point multiple times. And each time where you're at that critical point and you fumble the ball, there's a level of failure that resonates in the human mind if you don't have the right perspective about failure itself. Another crisis of the human condition. How does one deal with failure? Yes, we failed before, and there seems to be this pervasive sentiment that we are destined to fail. We are not destined to fail. That's another use of crisis, the art of crisis. The human mind, the modern human mind, believes itself to be destined to fail. The epidemic of self-doubt is one of the best ways to sell you a product. You're going to fail. You're going to die. You're in danger. You can't fend for yourself. So buy all of these things before you croak. This is the art of crisis. We're not destined to fail. We need strong leadership. We need adequate leadership. We need competent leadership. We need thoughtful leadership. We need deep, spiritual, courageous leadership. And if we get it, we can change this quick because we're not really that far in a crisis. Let's nationalize the Federal Reserve. You got the great Bobby Kennedy running. I like Bobby. Don't agree with everything he says, but I like Bobby. As far as Democrats go, I really like Bobby. I hope we get him on the show. We got our feelers out. We're trying to get him on the podcast. That would be incredible. I've met him before, talked to him before he was dealing with a little more of a health issue. He seems to be very healthy now, which is a miracle in and of itself. I'm happy about that. I like a lot of things he speaks against. But his uncle got his head blown off by the security state for saying this very thing, for calling out the Fed. That's the reality. For calling out the powers that be. The corruption and the preservation of the corrupt status quo. Let's nationalize the Fed. Let's take the $9 trillion on the Fed's balance sheet that's completely phony money, and let's rebuild America's manufacturing base. By executive order, matter of national security. Congress, Senate aside. Congress, Senate aside, and I may be sitting in one of those houses in 24. But Congress or Senate aside, let the president of this nation understand the importance of borders, the importance of a nation's sovereignty, and by that standard, by that understanding, issue an executive order that radically changes the trajectory of this nation's self-dependency by rebuilding America's manufacturing base, by rebuilding our manufacturing base. $9 trillion. We spent $6 trillion in Afghanistan. We got $9 trillion on the debt sheet of the Federal Reserve right now that is completely phony money. Money they just printed up and want to make you pay back with interest. It's not a federal institution. This is a private institution. I mean, how many fucking times does somebody have to say it for you to understand this is communism? The Federal Reserve is not a federal institution. It's got its hooks on federal officials, federal government officials, politicians, but they're not a federal institution. They're a private institution. Why are we letting a private institution weaponize the American populace and then charge us interest on money that they put forward and that they got together with a bunch of corrupt elites to make out of thin air without our consent in most cases. I mean, yeah, and with our consent when we vote, but the time from when we vote to when our vote matters to when our representatives vote on the things that matter is a nice chunk of time in which many politicians become co-opted and bought off and paid for by the people with the money. Corporatocracy, right? The banks, corporation. The private corporation. The Federal Reserve, corporation, right? This nation, on paper, is a corporation. Now, our ideals call for something greater. It calls for us to have a corporation that is guided and led by faith in God and inalienable rights and other ideological and intellectual ideas that make us more than the material world, that make us stewards of something greater than our material impulse, than our impulse for conquest and greed and all of these things. They call for something greater. They acknowledge something greater in us. But we have to answer that call. We have to answer that call. We need leaders to answer that call. Let's start with the Fed. I know the debt ceiling issue is on the rise, and the Republicans and Democrats, they already said they're going to negotiate. They're going to deal. Of course they're going to fucking deal. Of course McCarthy and McConnell and Biden and Janet Yellen, okay, and whoever else, right, Jamie Dimon and Larry Fink and all these people, they're going to come together. They're going to deal. They're going to come up with a deal. It's going to include the Ukraine. It's going to include China. You got a world-class deal. This deal is going to be world class. Okay. Of course, they're going to deal. They have no choice but to deal because that's who they are. And we have no choice but to let them deal because that's what we've chosen. And we got to ask ourselves now, why? Why we choose this? Why do we continue to choose this? Don't tell me, oh, well, we didn't know, or what you're saying is hard to follow. It's not hard to follow. Somebody sets a price on energy. Somebody somewhere sets a price on energy. That price on energy dictates the price of labor. That price on labor dictates the price of the final goods and products and services that are output in the economy. That dictates the price that you pay and that the government pays for whatever it is that we need to pay for. But the price is a fugazi. The price itself is a fugazi. The price is dictated by the spirit of the times. And understand that. Economy is greatly driven by the spirit of the times. If you go all the way down to the root goods, the root materials, resources, energy that's needed to run an economy, that's why energy is so important. It's all an energy game, right? Chris Martinson told us that. Steve Bannon has alluded to that. It's an energy game. I don't care if you want to move bananas, if you want to move paper clips, if you want to move COVID tests, if you want to move tennis shoes, if you want to move microphones, or if you want to move nuclear warheads. In our society today, you can move it by ground, you can move it by water, you can move it by air, right? Air, land, sea. Not a lot of options, right? I mean, it's still basic. In order to move it, you're going to need energy. Number one source of energy right now in the world is oil. Still to this day. They can try and tell you they're going to solar or wind or what. It's still energy. The only difference then is going to be the people who control solar and wind now dictate the final price or cost of the thing at the end. That's it. Okay? And there's infinite wind and solar power. Oh, is it? No, nothing's infinite. The finite nature of resources are predicated by the people who are willing to work and who are willing to work to create that product, service, or good in whatever form it's needed to be utilized, right? So people set the price on what we need. Some people somewhere, they're setting the price. And it's not by accident that the dollar is inflated. And it's not by accident that the Federal Reserve is directly involved in the inflation of the dollar. These are not accidents. All we have to do is say no. No, 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 no. No, there are few key industries that are vital to the nation's interest. There are a few key industries that are vital to the survival of this nation's economy. And those few vital industries we're going to take dominion over through good leadership in the federal government, starting with the POTUS office, right? Fed, let's get a grip on this economy scam, okay? Who do we need to go get these goods from? We have everything we need here. This is the outgrowth of a post-World War II democratic liberal order agenda and battle plan that America, a nation rich with all of the resources needed to be a self-sufficient nation, become dependent and on all these other international relationships, all these other international gross products. We need, beans from South America. We need oil from Saudi Arabia. We need wheat from the Ukraine, or, the Africans. They need the wheat from the Ukraine. But, pick one. We need microchips from Taiwan, right? We need our antibiotics from China because we We need all of our consumer goods from China for some odd reason, right? Because we can't build, Barbie dolls in fucking Wyoming. I don't know why, right? We can't build kitchen appliances there in Texas. I don't know why. Maybe it's too hotter than it is in Beijing. We need all these things from all these other places, Tanner. We gotta you can't have an economy, a stable economy, a strong economy without global supply chains. Scam. Scam by the people who set the price. Scam to undermine this nation's sovereignty and self-sufficiency and our economy. We have everything we need right here, and we are now at war. We are at war with Russia. By way of, we are at war with China. We were already at war with China. We are at war with all the nations that are going to eventually fold and bend the knee to China. We're in the war right now. It's funny that many women in modern America seem to want to justify women's entry in the workplace based on World War II. Funny how that happens. You get Federal Reserve, then you get income tax, then you get the the cleanup of World War One into World War II, where now the American women go to work, and now you get to tax the American women and the men when the war is over. Ooh, that's good one. Okay. Funny, many modern American women justify the entry of women into the workplace in the fact that in World War II, women had to go to work because men had to go off to war. Well, that would mean that that wartime in traditional American culture suspends normal cultural practices for war considerations. You follow that? You track it? When we're at war, things change. When we're at war, you dispense with certain normal cultural practices to acknowledge the prospect of the war you're in. The you know the the overall proposition of the war you're in, the overall landscape of the war you're in, the circumstance and situation you're in with the war, you have to acknowledge that and you have to act accordingly. So some things you have to change immediately. Okay. And I'm not one to suspend the Constitution or any of these things lightly and give even more power to the federal government because we're at war. But I am one to understand that a few vital industries with the right guardrails is exactly the type of political leadership this nation needs. Yep, 100%. Nope, and see, because I believe in my own will, right? I believe that with me at the desk, that I'm not interested in some tyrannical overreach of the federal government in totality. No. No, there are a few things we need to get in order right now. Number one of which, without a shout of a doubt, number one is the manufacturing. The manufacturing is the most vital interest of the American people right now today. It's not even close. Our manufacturing being here at home is just a good, solid, and reasonable practice of our economy. It's doable. It's doable. We have the resources. We have the people. We have everything we need to do it. Vital. Most vital. Second most vital is that our manufacturing not be tied up in a place that is our mortal enemy, China, who we're at war with. The country we're at war with is actually making all of our shit. I don't know how better to say it. The country we are currently in a war with makes our antibiotics. Guys, what the fuck are we doing? What are we doing here? What are we thinking? So I would like to nationalize the Federal Reserve. I would like to nationalize this central banking cartel now. like yesterday. Let's get a grip on what are we actually paying for? And even furthermore, who's coming to collect this debt? I mean, this debt number, don't get me wrong, we're in the debt. The debt is there. But who's coming to collect? Nobody's coming to collect the debt. Nobody's calling in the debt. The debt is a number that's provided for you to continue to justify why they have to continue to steal your money. Or why they have to give your freedoms over eventually. And that's the flip side of the coin. That eventually we'll have to give all your freedoms over. Eventually we'll have to bend to the CCP. Eventually, we America's is finished. It's over. We lost. It was an experiment. You hear people say that all the time. This is an experiment. Yeah. I guess when you let your fucking mad scientists do gain of function research, I guess it is a fucking experiment, right? Experiment. No, it's not a fucking experiment, you sycophantic, fucking weird, scientific, nomadic, no nation, no sacred honor having psychopaths. It's not an experiment. This is people's lives. This is a nation. This nation's not an experiment. Who does the debt have to go to? Who do we have to pay? The debt is on the American people, but the debt is the feds. You guys don't understand. The banks printed the money. When they go to print a budget and we don't have the money like we haven't had for a while now, the banks are printing the money and they're telling the people, you pay it back. You got to pay it back. Why? Why? It's a scam. Oh, well, China holds the debt. Well, tell China, come fucking get it. Yeah. Yeah, it's a big decision ahead of us. All the easy answers are behind us. All the easy decisions are behind us. This is not an experiment. This is not a test, people. I smile to keep from pretending like, I smile to try and, make it easy, let it go down, make it digestible. Because for some reason, oh man, you just constantly, it's doom and gloom. Well, this is where we're at. I mean, even the theory of war and dire, urgent situations makes us uncomfortable, right? We can't even handle it in theory. It's not by surprise we're not able to handle it well now that we're actually in it. We're in it. It's like right now. Tough decisions ahead of us. Yeah, war is sometimes a problem. When you get this far down the track, war is a potential. I mean, there's always a potential for war. We owe the debt to the Fed. We owe the debt to the what? The Bank of London? Who? Who's holding the bonds? Who's holding the Treasury bonds? Who's going to dump them? They're going to dump them? Everybody's going to dump their U.S. bonds, and that's going to make the dollar what? That's going to make the dollar crash? Why? Why? Because somebody who sets the price says that the dollar's not worth anything? Because the dollar became the biggest export. Who do you think was behind that? The Bretton Woods Conference. See, we all think that it's a symbol of our power that the U.S. dollar is the world's hegemony. I see it as our greatest liability. Because our dollar is our dollar and our production, our entire economy and the faith of our economy is predicated on being the world's reserve currency. Globalism. The sine qua non of globalism is the U.S. dollar being the world's reserve currency. It's a banking scam. And just when the time is right, the dollar will collapse. And it will justify that people in America live in radical poverty, chaos, and starve to death, or can't get bread. That a gallon of gasoline will be $100. Inflation, another Great Depression. You think it's by accident that the Great Depression came after the? You people understand what time are we at right now, Tanner? Hour 15. I'm just getting started with you fuck sticks. Okay, you don't look. Do you understand? Do you understand that after World War One, that the American financial elites made the decision through our politicians to go in and fund Germany? We paid Germany's reparations. Understand? I'll say it again. Mr. and Mrs. I'm not going to pay. Mr. and Mrs. I'm not going to pay. We funded Germany's reparations to Europe. Why? Because we charged them interest. So we gave them the money. We loaned it to them. And then when Germany's economy, no, sorry, when the American economy hit troubled waters at the end of the Roaring '20s, we called on Germany to pay the loan. We called in the loans on Germany, and Germany couldn't pay, or Germany paid what they could, and then the rest of their economy collapsed, and that became the platform by which Adolf Hitler made the rally cry that the banksters had doomed Germany to a fate worse than death. My, how the real history goes. Is that a justification for Adolf Hitler? No. A psycho is a psycho is a psycho. I'm just telling you how we played the role. We lent Germany money to pay their reparations, their war reparations after World War I. And then at the end of the Roaring '20s, we called on those loans, we called in the loans. Germany collapses. This became the platform where a bunch of beer drinking, a bunch of beer drinking, pub dwelling Nazis rallied an entire country behind a platform that said that the bankster Jews are the reason why Germany just failed. But it wasn't just the Jews. It wasn't just the bankster Jews. And really, it was Germany's own leaders who signed the fucking deal in the first place. Now, they were forced to sign the deal because they lost a war. So you could say when it comes to being forced to sign a deal at the end of a barrel of a gun, there's no more being forced to sign a deal at the tip of a spear than that, right? I mean, that's about as coerced as you can get. You just lose a war, we're making you pay reparations. If you don't pay it, we're just going to commandeer the whole fucking nation, right? Never. So too comes World War II and the Great Depression. And at the end of World War II, they restructured the entire global economy around the US dollar. Guys, I mean, look, this is what it is. In a nation, America, a nation that was growing and thriving, becomes entangled in this web of international, financial, military conflict. Nobody was coming to invade us. Hitler wasn't coming to, now, again, World War II, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, so that brought us into the war then. But, I mean, in effect, okay, they made it to Pearl Harbor, way out there. They weren't coming to California. I'm not making an excuse for Pearl Harbor. Okay, that was tragic, and we did what we dealt with Japan the way we should have. But the whole thing was predicated on America's dollar becoming this mechanism of global finance, and we're still letting them run the scam today. The dollar's going to crash because people are going to dump their bonds. They're going to dump their dollars. They're going to start to burn their dollars because they won't be worth anything because the international bank cartel says so. Well, they only say so because they control the corporations here who run the business here, who set the price here. Now, many people hear what I'm saying and go, well, man, you sound like a communist. No, what they're doing is communism. That's communism. That's communism by a different name. That's communism by a different brand. That's all it is. Okay? Corporatocracy, international bank cartel are communists. The only difference is they're giving you the illusion of choice. They're giving you the illusion of choice. You think you start a bit, everybody likes to think in America, oh, if I start a business and I provide a product that's better than the competition, that's going to ensure that I'm successful. That's called selling you a dream. That's pimping. You're getting pimped. That's not the way it is. You got to get lucky. Anybody who's had a very, very successful business will tell you got to get lucky. Even in sports, I had to get lucky. I did more fucking push-ups and more going over the game in my mind and the scenarios and playing one-on-one with myself in real game scenarios than any other kid my age probably. I was a fanatic. I was a savant about it, okay? I had to get lucky. Had I not gotten in trouble at the University of Minnesota and not been able to play my first year, or I would have been coming off the bench because players had seniority over me, okay? Had I not gotten a waiver, had I gone to Kentucky and been playing with John Wall, had I not decided not to go to Kentucky because my pregnant childhood sweetheart at the time was going to have our first son, and she wasn't going to be able to come to Kentucky, so I wasn't going to be able to be there when my son was born. If that hadn't happened, if I hadn't ended up at Iowa State, who was rebuilding and had a coach who was a former pro who played with Kevin Garnett and had seen how it could work when a big man brings the ball up and allowed me to play the one at a time when there were no 260, 270-pound point guards. If that hadn't happened, I wouldn't even have been drafted. It's likely that I wouldn't have even been drafted in the NBA. Circumstance. Look, now, when the time came, I performed. And it's very similar with business and corporations. When the time comes and you've been selected, can you perform? Does your product perform? Does your business model perform? Yeah. But don't think that people aren't getting selected off of the good old boys club. Don't think a lot of people aren't getting selected based on, what do they call? It's who you know. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not what you know, it's who you know. It's not what you know, who you know is the most crony capitalist statement of the 20th century. It's not what you know, it's who you know. Okay, well, look, a lot of people who have successful businesses, very successful business, we're talking Koch brother successful businesses, they have to know international bank cartel oligarchs. When you know somebody that closely at that level, it's not even about the money, okay? It's not about the money anymore. It's about power. It's about leverage. It's about influence. It's about influence over the levers of society, the means of production. Communism. I don't know how to break it down any better than that, Tanner. I mean, if they don't like it like that, they just don't like it, right? If you don't like it like that, you probably just don't want it. Communism. We're living in a communist society already. The Federal Reserve has turned us into a communist nation. We're a silent communist nation. And we need to turn back from that now. But turning back from that means we're going to have to do some things that people will try and say are communist. Imagine that. Imagine the Democrats trying to accuse you of what they themselves are doing, or any corrupt political group for that matter. That's the most common. They just project. They just knee jerk. The knee jerk reaction is to accuse you of the thing that they're doing. It's like an argument between two 9-year-olds, right? Hey, you stepped on my foot. No, you stepped on my foot, right? That's what they do. There are a few institutions in this country that we are going to have to take control of with a genuine American spirit, a genuine America First spirit to ensure the survival of this nation. And it's going to be a tough decision, and it's going to call us to renounce our former prejudgments about how government operates. That's the only way to do it now. Our manufacturing is first and foremost. We have got to get control over our manufacturing. We have got to become self-sufficient. That's a matter of national security. There's no ifs, ands, and buts about it. $9 trillion on the Fed's balance sheet. We could get the manufacturing up and running in this country in no time. In no time. Anybody who hasn't done it doesn't isn't promoting that we do it, isn't on board with us doing it. You should question their intentions and their motivation immediately. Immediately. Anybody who would be against us giving the Federal Reserve a haircut and taking the $9 trillion on their balance sheet that they invented out of thin air and want us to pay back with interest, the American people, they want us to pay it back in interest while they continue to support policy that sends our money everywhere else but in your pocket. Anybody who opposes us taking $9 trillion immediately as a matter of national security to rebuild this nation's manufacturing base is in on it. And it's going to be most of your corporations. And we're going to need new corporations. We're going to need new companies. We're going to have to restructure the whole thing. But restructuring doesn't mean a redistribution of wealth like the Marxists or a redistribution of money like the communists. They're already redistributing the land. They're already redistributing the wealth. They're already redistributing the resources right under your nose. If you create a hyper-financialized economy where the interest rates and the monetary policy always favors those who have the assets, then you as the working man eventually will be left with nothing else than government dependency and welfare. Hello? Communism. The difference is the Chinese, they walk around with their communist balls hanging out. No, well, this is communism. Duh, you better get on the train. We like to disguise our communism, right, with the illusion of freedom of choice over a number of decades. But ultimately, those that sit above us know eventually you're going to have to bow because you're not going to have enough to survive on your own. But the whole thing is a lie. That's the brainwashing. That's the psyop. The whole thing is a scam. It's a financial scam. It's a financial Ponzi scheme because the reality is it doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't cost us anything to make our own food. It doesn't cost us anything. Is agriculture an expensive endeavor? Yeah. When you let Monsanto and fucking Cargill set the fucking prices, yeah, I guess it is pretty expensive. When you got to import beans from a world away because you just need this special hybrid type of bean for your Chipotle, yeah, I guess that does make agriculture really expensive. But ultimately, we have everything we need in this country. We've let a few global elites use America, our people, and our resources to tell a narrative that all these other places need what America has and America needs what all these other places have. That's what it is. That's what and it's a lie. It's an absolute lie. We have everything we need. And we need to get serious about what we need. And we need to get serious about controlling what we need. A nation with borders, right? And to end here, I just want to get into this. This will be my last little piece here. I hope you understand. We're going to keep working on this. I want you to understand. I want you to spread it far and wide. We're going to start talking about shit on this podcast that is as radical as you can possibly imagine. Doesn't get no more radical than this. Let's nationalize the Fed. Let's nationalize the entire banking system here in this country. Let's not get stupid with it. Let's not be dumb. We're not going to print money just for the sake of printing money. We're not going to raise a debt ceiling 1 penny. What we need to do is identify what key vital institutions, what key vital resources do we need to protect for the survival of this nation, and let's do it. Let's do it. We're willing to go, and to my point, as a segue, Mexico, I hear they got Chinese immigrants coming through the Mexican border now. Thousands of Chinese immigrants. Thousands of Chinese immigrants are coming through the Mexico border. What? What? Build the fucking wall already. Are you guys kidding me? Now we're letting Chinese immigrants in through the Mexico border too? Okay, guys. National borders. A border is not just a political construct. It's not just a line drawn on a map. It's not just an invisible line drawn by politicians to divvy up land and resources. A border creates a physical boundary on man's unfettered ambition. There is something very spiritual and metaphysical and deeply significant to a nation with borders. Even before we had maps and nations and politicians and borders, you had tribes that had a territory, and they had a very thorough understanding of that territory, and they protected that territory. And they didn't let people come into their territory unchecked, and they didn't just venture on into other people's territory unchecked. And when they did, they were usually ready for war, okay? When they did, they needed to, because they had exhausted all of the resource needed in their own land to be able to survive. And don't get me wrong, a few times you had a few, egomaniac jerk-offs who just wanted more. Of course, there's always that. There's always piracy. That's a crown business model for sure. But sometimes, shit, you just run out of water in the spot where you're living, and you got to go venture out to get some more water. And you know, when you venture to go get some more water, if there's any people over there and they got access to that water, they're going to fight for that water, right? And the fight for water is coming, fresh water, if we let them tell the story about the price of water, okay? So it's all. What I'm saying is the difference, the glaring difference, the obvious difference between civilization today and civilization in a more barbaric time, where people crossed over invisible territorial lines to fight about natural resources, is we have all the resources measured out now. These people were in a genuine level of unknown. They ran out of water right here. They've been living here for 3 generations. They didn't know where else to go to get water. They're on an adventure. And on an adventure, they had to be ready for whatever dangers were out there. And you get drawn on another tribe with spears, and it's like, hey, we came for water. Do we even speak the same language? We want the water. You saying that too fucking loud, buddy. I think you're going to attack. Right? I don't know that fucking language. Is he saying attack? Was he telling me to drop my spear? What do you think he's saying? He's saying they're going to attack us. Well, it's on. Right? You could see a scenario where genuine conflict sparked in a time that was more barbaric. Why are we acting like we don't understand each other's language anymore? Why are we acting like we don't have the whole world mapped out? Why are we acting like we don't know where all the resources are? Why are we acting like we don't know how to extract and efficiently produce the things that people need? Why are we pretending that this is communism in reverse? And this is the two sides of the New World Order. And here's how fucking dangerous and manipulative Satan actually is. He's taken the Democrat welfare side, the Democrat liberal welfare technocrats, New World Order technocrats, and he's given them that very narrative. Globalism, communism, with enough resources for everybody. We should all share. But the way you know it's bullshit is the welfare technocrats are the ones saying that we have a population problem. I promise you I'm not that smart. This is obvious. The whole narrative should really be there are more than enough resources for every person on this planet. Not only every person, there are more than enough resources if we doubled in people. There's more than enough land. There's more than enough wood. There's more than enough. There's more than enough iron. There's more than enough oil. There's more than enough fresh water. Guys, there's more than enough of everything. The question is the people who have laid dominion to owning the thing in the most arbitrary sense. They own the thing in greed. They don't own it in Christian charity. They own it in greed, not open up your house to your neighbor because we're so untrustworthy of our neighbors. And we should be now. And they've ensconced that in the American and modern person's psychology by making our society more untrustworthy, by making us more detached and less communal. The whole effort to make us less communal is to justify the ownership being less charitable so that now people look across and they go, I got to keep everything to myself. No, you don't have to keep it to yourself because there's more than enough. But the same people who want to bring you communism, they're so twisted. They're so twisted that they can only bring you communism in a perverted form where they got to kill 80% of you in order to make it work. You can't make it up. The Yuval Noah Harari's aren't, and he actually, Yuval Noah Harari did say, remember in the video, he goes, I don't think food's going to be the problem, right? He said that. But his buddy Bill Gates has another thought about it. His buddy Bill Gates across the way, his buddy Bill Gates says, all these African and Arab countries, we got to slow down their population growth. It's out of control. These people are out of control. The people are, you yuppie, liberal, fucking omnisexual technocrat fuckstick. How are you going to tell a bunch of people that were living on that land well before you ever ventured there to discover the way they live? How are you going to tell them that their population is out of control? Their population is ebbing and flowing the way that it always has. They're not even plagued by modernity in many ways. So their population is on a natural trajectory. If nature isn't killing them, if nature isn't, if plague or asteroids or I don't know, drought or whatever it is, if that isn't killing them, well, who the fuck are you to tell the Africans and the Arab nations that their population growth is out of control? These are your welfare technocrats. These are your communist technocrats. The only way to make the whole resource thing work is to kill you. And what do we have here in our Federal Reserve? Again, we have a communist manifestation of a financial policy and Politburo that tells you the only way to make the economy work is if it revolves around a death cult. Old people who need to be, cared for, Medicare, right? Right? The health insurance, Social Security, security for the social, and the military. And I think Professor Penn laid it out great. If you didn't get a chance, if you didn't get a chance over the last couple of days, make sure that you go watch Professor Penn tomorrow. We switched his time to Tuesday, so you don't have to watch me rant for 2 hours and then him go on and try and explain things in a more academic way for 2 hours. So tomorrow night, watch Professor Penn. But I think he did a great job of highlighting this fact. He did a great job of explaining how abortion, yes, from a Christian sense, it's wrong. From a Christian sense, it's wrong morally, ethically, yes. From a political sense, however, it's a little further down the trough than these military-industrial complex neocons that work on weapons of mass destruction writ large. And not only that, they'll use them. They've used them and they will use them. And not only that, but the technological advancement that was the predicate for abortion at mass came from the impulse to war. Go check the specs, I guarantee you. Because it's, for the most part, in the 19th, 20th, 21st century, it's been military and conflict that have driven technological advancement. You can go right in and read it. Most of the grants and things from the universities and the scientific departments were greatly driven by military impulse. I've said it before. I said it again. Again, Roe v. Wade was the predicate for double tap drone strikes. But industrialization in World War I and World War II were the predicate for Roe v. Wade. Let's see how deep you can go to find the solution. If Roe v. Wade was the predicate to double tap drone strikes, then World War I and World War II were the predicate for Roe v. Wade. But all three were predicated on an over-financialization of economies and nations. Centralized banking. Let's go back to the top. Who sets the price? Do the people really set the price? Do the people really set the price? Think about it now. Be honestly. Who sets the price? How has our economy become inflated? It becomes inflated by price setting. By price setting from price gougers. People who set interest rates. You think when the Fed goes to set an interest rate, they don't know the ripple effect it'll have when the corporations who are part of the free market enterprise economy are going to raise their prices to tax you for what the bank has loaned them? You think they don't know that? Come on. Come on. You're just willing to accept it right now. That's the reality. We're willing to accept it, and we will do everything in our power to find an out to demonize a Donald Trump or let them crucify a Donald Trump so we don't have to wrestle with it. So we don't have to face it, to confront it. None of this is out of our control because none of it is without our consent. None of this is out of our control because none of it is without our consent. Anybody who tells you otherwise is lying to you. Our consent is who we voted for. Our consent is where we spend our dollars. Our consent is the narrative we let them tell us in between electing people as a catharsis to try and change the way the country is headed. Yeah, we should vote. We should be careful with our dollar. We should build a patriot, an alternative economy. But first and foremost, we should understand the scam so we can be even remotely well equipped to confront these people. Who sets the price on water? Who sets the price? And in times of war, is it prudent for a government who actually physically controls the border of its sovereign land that holds the resources, the vital national resources? Is it prudent for us to reevaluate the price? What's the price to build a home? What's the price to develop land? What's the price to get running water to the land? What's the price to get running electricity to the land? It doesn't cost a price. You could find, right now today, if 75 million people voted for Donald Trump, you could take 2 to 3 years to nationalize the economy, and there would be millions upon millions of people who would volunteer their time to do the work to make sure that people had a home with running water, running electricity while we upstart this country's manufacturing base. You could do that. People volunteer their time all the time for all kinds of shit. It's just that the things they volunteer their time for usually don't end up resulting in anything. It's a jerk off. This is how they use the engine. This is the most radical form of. Do you understand what I'm saying, Tanner? Sometimes I'm sitting here alone. It's just me and Tanner. I don't know. If I was here in the crowd, you guys might have booed and threw tomatoes already. I don't know. So I just get to keep going. I got to check with Tanner sometimes to make sure I'm even making sense. You understand the most radical scam of this proto-communist narrative are the NGOs and the nonprofits who are put there to further make you feel like the price isn't being set. Or actually, they're there to make you feel like the price is being set. But some of these people are so unfortunate. We have to create this special class of corporation that makes the real financial oligarchs, who gives them tax exempt status or tax breaks on certain things, so they can out of altruism and humanitarianism, right, give back to the poor. What? It's a scam, and the money doesn't even get there. It's right in the it's right in the incorporating documents. It's right in the articles of incorporation. It's right in the normal cultural practice of nonprofits, okay, and foundations. What is the running percentage of nonprofit raised money that goes to the actual cause? I think it's something like 10%. I think 90% go to administrative and business costs. 90% of the money raised in the nonprofits, usually go to the nonprofit itself. And the other part is being used as a tax shelter. And that's cool. I get it. But only 10% of the money goes to, and that's probably being generous. I mean, that's the majority of nonprofits. I may be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. But we can look at, I'll have Tanner look it up. We'll talk about it Wednesday. But I think it's something high, like 90% of the money that nonprofits make go back to running the nonprofit. And then the nonprofit says, well, we provide a service. Really? Well, let's kick the nonprofit the nonprofit whole domain into high gear, because we're at war now, okay? We were willing to let women go to work during World War II. Let's put people to work now. Let's put people to work now. $9 trillion? $9 trillion. Guys, we spent $100 billion already in the Ukraine. $100 billion. I think that's something like $1,250,000 homes. I think so. No, it'd be $4 billion. No, let me think. No, it'd be $4 million. Right. $4,250,000 homes. Understand what I'm trying to tell you. This is mathematics. This isn't fucking conspiracy theory or just some economic theory. This is simple math. We've sent $100 billion to the Ukraine already in 18 months. Not to mention what we sent before then, but we've sent $100 billion to the Ukraine. $100 billion. That's 250. That's $4,250,000 homes. 4 million people in the country that we could provide a home for. Not for welfare, not to get them hooked into the Democrat vote, to get them working for America. Let's use our money for America. Just like the nonprofits, they take 90% of the money to reinvest in the nonprofit so it continues to run. Why do all of these institutions get to reinvest their money into the institution to keep the institution alive? Why do they all get to do it, but us as a nation, as a whole, this nation where we all live, why does our nation have to keep giving our money to everybody else? Why is our nation not expected to reinvest in ourselves? Why do we tell the lie that sending $100 billion to Ukraine and upholding democracy is investing in ourselves? That having some cordial and strategic and profitable, productive international relationship with the CCP is reinvesting in America. Protecting Europe is reinvesting in America, in this nation. Whatever the case, but whatever. The relationship with the Saudis, a stable Middle East is a sound investment in America. No, it's not. No, it isn't. Getting the American people to work, getting the American people to be self-sufficient, getting America as a nation to be an equity society versus a debt society, meaning we have to produce things instead of buying things on borrowed money or phony money. That's how you reinvest in America. And they already have that whole side of the argument roped off, because when you venture into the place where you talk about taking certain eminent domain over certain vital natural resources, it's already flagged as communism, or it's already flagged as Nazism. You see how the game goes? I'm not afraid of what somebody else is going to call me on either side of the aisle. I'm just here to deal with the reality, folks. You can try and preserve your free market enterprise all you want to. You can try and preserve your post-World War II democratic liberal order all you want to. But the fact still remains that the CCP, your mortal enemy, makes your antibiotics. And if you don't want to address that, if you're not willing to address that, if you're not willing to confront your prejudgments about policy and governance to address that, then you deserve to fucking die. And trust me, by God, you will die. They will come and they will kill you if your own leaders don't do it for them first. This has been another episode of Please Call Me Crazy. The fight continues. Godspeed.